But I'm going to do my best to give you an insight, or just to give you a slice of what we've been doing at the Alternative UK for the last 10 years, but to give you a real sense of what happened in 2023, because we founded the Alternative UK in 2017 on the question of, if politics is broken, what's the alternative? And some of you may think, oh, politics, right? I'm already turning off. But believe me, that's after 3 decades of moving through, working in the world of the arts, working in the world of conflict transformation, looking at hard and soft power, and looking also internally. I've become a psychotherapist. If you like, I've traveled many different pathways to get to the point where I'm now finally asking the question, what has politics got to do with this, and how can politics make any difference? So I'm going to share my very brief set of slides with you, and hope that somehow I can take you on this journey of 2023 with me. So here we go. Just briefly, this idea that Planet A is alive. So we were inspired to find a word that, or an idea of a place where we could go and be in our vision together, knowing that Elon Musk was saying to the world, you know, we've trashed this one, let's go to Mars. In the face of that idea, we thought, what is the option? What other way of looking and being on a planet that is clearly dying? Can we bring in this idea that something else is coming? And the idea of Planet A is really that we've come to a point in our history where we have the ability together to reconnect with obviously indigenous wisdom, but also our own essential humanity, and bring all of that now to the surface for the first time. Because in this era of the internet and infinite connectivity between us, this actual technological, spiritual, physical, emotional ability to reconnect with the whole has to be named. And we're calling that place where we stand, when we can stand on that conviction, we're calling that place Planet A. And we wanted it to be A, not just because of the alternative, because we want to give a sense that this is the beginning of the alphabet. This is a renewal. It's a regeneration. We're starting again, and that we are regeneration A, and we're being led now by the young people who were born into this era. So just to take you back a little bit into the world that we're familiar with, which, you know, we know this term polycrisis, 𝗵𝘃𝗲. These were the words that were actually the most famous words of 2022. And we started with that notion. And we said that there was at least 4 elements to it. It's the crisis, the internal crisis of the individual human being. There's the crisis of action, knowing that there are answers, but not knowing what the correct actions are. There's the wider crisis of our shared planet, which is both climate and injustice, and many other terms for the whole crisis that we share together through our culture. And then there's the crisis of our structure. How does all of this relate to power? And when we look at the design of power, and we look at the design of our current politics, we'll know that the toxicity and the problems lie within the structure that hold all of this 𝗵𝘃𝗲 and polycrisis in place. But what we discovered when we began our journey of, which was 7 years ago, of asking the question, what is the alternative? We looked at the fact that we can't read about the solutions, we can't have access to the solutions. But if we look carefully enough, and this has really been the work that Violetta has been sharing with all of us, if we look closely enough, we'll see that all over the world, there's this phenomenon of what we call community agency networks, that people all over the world have been working to come together across divides, but at a systemic level. Whether you're talking about transition towns, you're talking about cooperatives, eco-villages, neighborocracy, that actually the sum of our human potential is that we have been coming together and we have been working systemically, and we are beginning to come together in communities, overcoming our divides. And this movement that we have recognized, and I think all of you have been referring, that we now describe it as an eco-civilization, is not a word that belongs to any one group of people. It doesn't belong to us especially. It's a shock, actually, to find how many places this word eco-civilization is appearing in books, in theories of change. But also, for example, it was eye-opening to me to discover how eco-civilization is the political goal of China. And that within China, there's so much initiative going on that has been captured by this word. If anything, eco-civilization, which implies what we call cosmo-local community agency networks, are appearing globally. And that the real question is, how do we organize ourselves around this concept, and what is the politics of that? So in the year 2023, we decided to look at it as 4 distinct entry points to eco-civilization. The top 2 you will see are to do with individual actions of human beings in the places they live. And the bottom 2 are more to do with the broader systemic, cultural, and structural conditions for individuals to act. So what we've done within the Alternative UK is open up what we call incubators for the development of each of these 4 different entry points that are nevertheless always pointing at each other, and they're integrated. Eco-civilization is the integration of these 4 spheres of activity. So you'll be familiar with them. In the top left, this is the world of personal development. It's the world of how does a human being really upgrade themselves to be ready for the future. So that's a whole world. And when I say a world, it's a world of activity, of learning, of publishing, of media. It's a whole world. On the top right, we're referring to there not just the eco-civilization, which is the whole integration of the 4, but what are the actual daily actions? What does an individual human being do day to day if they are part of the eco-civilization? So this focus on being on the territory, being with others, having an action, addresses all sorts of things like, what is my work? How do we work? How do we do citizen action? What is money? How do we spend money? What do we spend money on? What do I eat? The actions part of being an individual is really our focus in the top right. Bottom left is a crucial part of all of this, is how does this news of the new eco-civilization get carried? Because if we're always simply turning to our own daily newspapers, if we're simply turning to the internet as we find it, we will be always overwhelmed by the narratives that are still being pushed by the old system and the old politics. We'll feel hopeless. So the need to bring a new media into being is the focus of the news from Planet A. And finally, this idea of a new political system means that it's not enough to have a new political party taking part in the old system. We actually need a new political system to carry this new development between old and new. So a new political system, I'm just using this great image of 2 legs, 1 body. So the left leg is really about the old system as we know it, which is still, let's face it, holding up the world in its very, vulnerable way. But it is kind of holding things together to the extent that it is. But the right leg really denotes everything that's happening amongst people in the cosmo-local community agency networks, which need to find some sense of autonomous self-organization and governance so that it can put pressure on the old system from within this idea of human evolution. So we're calling that the parallel polis, and we are busy developing a parallel polis from and through all these network of networks that you are all part of. So these are 4 different spheres of activity which are regularly coming together, and every week we are reporting on them and reporting on their progress through what we call the daily alternative. And then the task that we're coming to now is, how do we describe a manifesto for this kind of politics? I'm just obviously just rushing through this. I've probably taken my 10 minutes already. But the question of how do we create the media, the self-governing, and the reporting of what we're doing, some of which is going on here today, and really the work of Ecocivilisation is to keep this going all the time. But how do we come to some decisions about this? And that is the technology that we're currently developing alongside many, many other people, is how to give people a voice and give them the space to deliberate the problems that we're having, and then come to decisions after deliberation. So we're not looking for a kind of direct democracy where everybody can just put up their hand and say yes or no to the questions that are being asked by the old system. We're finding within the community agency networks the technology to help people to deliberate together, to have access to cosmolocal information, and to slowly make decisions for themselves first, and then in connection with the others at a more planetary level. So this is not a small task. We're all in it together. There's, if we were to get out the way, 100 other people will step into the place that we're now occupying. But what happened just at the end of last year is a realization that we had that there's a danger always that we can talk and be what we call systems conveners, always describing what's going on. But unless we ourselves get into a place from which we can experience the reality of being in a community, in a cosmo-local community agency network ourselves, that has political agency, then we won't be able to really share our experience directly with others either. So for that reason, we moved our offices from London to Edinburgh at the end of last year, almost entirely because in Edinburgh, they have a proportional system, which means that any political project would have some agency, whereas in London, a new political project cannot be seen or heard. So that was the big move that we made. We invoked all of the powers that Violetta was describing, and really manifested something much larger than we expected, and much more promising in terms of a space to do this work than we're really prepared for. But now, we're stepping into that and can feel, if you like, the cosmo-localism of our work. So I hope that wasn't too much of a deep dive too fast into what we think is possible. But suffice it to say, our goal of manifesting not only a parallel polis, which is the people coming together and a governance system for making decisions, but a political party that could take place and take part in the political system, but that party itself should be a global party. It should be a global party because in each country, already there's 5 different countries that we know are slowly giving rise to a party like this. We should all be connected to each other. And that continues what we would call the fractal eco-civilizational growth.